Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Ethan Hawthorne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, seeing his wife Olivia's name. Medical conference in Chicago next week. Don't forget. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He had an idea. With Olivia out of town, he could finally tackle that bedroom renovation project she'd been hinting at for months. What better way to show his love than surprising her with a freshly updated space? He headed to the hardware store, mind already racing with plans. Paint swatches, new curtains, maybe even that fancy light fixture she'd been eyeing. As he loaded supplies into the car, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered that something felt off about Olivia's text. He shook it off. After all, he was a 35-year-old high school history teacher, not some paranoid teenager. Back home, Ethan dove into the project with gusto. He moved furniture, taped off baseboards, and started emptying closets. That's when he found it, a plain shoebox tucked away in the far corner of Olivia's side. Curiosity got the better of him. He lifted the lid, expecting old photos or keepsakes. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Passionate love letters, signed simply A. Photos of Olivia with a man Ethan didn't recognize, looking far too intimate for comfort. 2 prepaid phones he'd never seen before. And most chilling of all, a handwritten note outlining a plan to deal with E permanently. Ethan's hands shook as he rifled through the contents. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But as he read letter after letter, examined photo after photo, the truth became undeniable. His wife was having an affair, and it seemed she might be planning something far worse. He stumbled to the bed, collapsing onto the edge. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Who was this A? And what exactly did they mean by dealing with E permanently? Ethan's first instinct was to confront Olivia immediately, but a small, rational part of his brain held him back. If she truly was planning something sinister, tipping his hand could be dangerous. He needed advice. He needed support. He needed Marcus. Fumbling for his phone, Ethan dialed his best friend and fellow teacher. Marcus picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey man, what's up?" Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke. "Marcus, I need you. Can we meet?" The rusty nail. As soon as possible. There must have been something in his tone, because Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. Hang tight, buddy." 30 minutes later, Ethan sat across from Marcus in a dimly lit booth at the Rusty Nail. The bar was mercifully quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Ethan's hands trembled as he pushed the shoebox across the table. "I found this while cleaning out the closet," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not going to believe what's inside." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he began examining the contents. Ethan watched his friend's expression shift from curiosity to shock to outright anger. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," Marcus breathed. I don't even know what to say." "Tell me I'm crazy," Ethan pleaded. "Tell me there's some innocent explanation for all of this." Marcus shook his head. "I wish I could, man, but this looks pretty damn incriminating." They spent the next hour poring over every scrap of evidence. The love letters were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of the relationship. The photos showed Olivia in various intimate settings with a tall, dark-haired man Ethan didn't recognize. "Wait a second," Ethan said, squinting at one particular image. "I know this guy. That's Dr. Adrian Blackwood. He works with Olivia at Evergreen General." Marcus whistled low. "Well, that certainly complicates things. You think this medical conference is just a cover?" Ethan nodded miserably. "Has to be. God, how could I have been so blind?" "Hey, don't beat yourself up," Marcus said, reaching across the table to grip Ethan's shoulder. "You trusted your wife. That's not a crime." "No, but what they're planning might be," Ethan replied, gesturing to the ominous note. "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" Marcus thought for a moment. "We need more information. Concrete evidence. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? Ethan blinked. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. You really think that's necessary? Look, man, I hate to say it, but if half of what's in this box is true, you need to protect yourself, both legally and, well, physically. The gravity of the situation hit Ethan anew. His wife, the woman he'd loved and trusted for years, might actually be planning to harm him. The room seemed to spin. This can't be happening, he muttered, on top of everything else. Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean? Ethan sighed heavily. I got passed over for department head last week. Again. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but this. He gestured helplessly at the damning evidence spread before them. Shit, I'm sorry, Marcus said. Why didn't you tell me about the job? Ethan shrugged. Didn't want to burden you with my problems. Fat lot of good that did me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ethan's predicament hanging heavy between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we find a good PI. Get some hard evidence of what Olivia and this Adrian guy are up to. In the meantime, you act completely normal at home. Don't give her any reason to suspect you know. Ethan nodded, grateful for his friend's clear-headed thinking. And then what? Then we figure out exactly what they're planning and how to stop it, Marcus said firmly. But one step at a time, all right? We've got your back, man. For the first time since discovering the shoebox, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this. With Marcus's help, maybe he could unravel this nightmare and come out the other side. As they left the bar, Ethan's resolve solidified. He would get to the bottom of Olivia's deception, and whatever she and Adrian were planning, he'd be ready. Little did Ethan know, the rabbit hole went far deeper than he could have imagined. The following Monday, Ethan found himself sitting across from Veronica Sloan, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and results. Marcus had done some quick research and set up the meeting, insisting that time was of the essence. Veronica listened intently as Ethan laid out the situation, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Mr. Hawthorne, I won't sugarcoat this. What you're describing is serious. If your suspicions are correct, we're dealing with infidelity at best, and potentially much worse. Ethan swallowed hard. How quickly can you get me proof? Give me a week, Veronica said. I'll need access to your home when your wife is out, and any passwords or account information you can provide. The more I have to work with, the faster I can get results. Ethan nodded, scribbling down everything she asked for. As he handed over the information, a wave of guilt washed over him. This felt like a betrayal. But then he remembered the contents of that shoebox and steeled himself. Olivia had betrayed him first. True to her word, Veronica delivered results within days. The stack of evidence she presented made Ethan's stomach churn. I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but your suspicions were correct, Veronica said, her voice gentle but firm. Your wife is indeed having an affair with Dr. Adrian Blackwood, but that's not all we uncovered. Ethan braced himself. What else? Veronica spread out a series of financial documents. It appears that Dr. Blackwood and your wife have been embezzling funds from the hospital's charitable foundation. We're talking significant sums of money here. Ethan's head spun. This was so much worse than he'd imagined. How? How long has this been going on? Based on the records we've found, at least 6 months, possibly longer. Veronica hesitated before continuing. There's more, Mr. Hawthorne, and I'm afraid it's not good news. She pulled out bank statements and retirement account information. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the drastically reduced balances. Your wife has been systematically draining your joint savings and retirement funds, Veronica explained. The money's been funneled into offshore accounts we haven't been able to trace yet. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Olivia cheating on him, but she was stealing from him too? How could he have been so blind? As if reading his thoughts, Veronica continued. Mr. Hawthorne, I've seen cases like this before. It's not uncommon for the victim to blame themselves. But I want you to understand something. Your wife has been gaslighting you for months. Gaslighting? Ethan echoed, the term vaguely familiar. Veronica nodded. It's a form of psychological manipulation. She's been making you doubt your own memory and judgment. Those times you felt confused or thought you were losing track of things, it was deliberate. Memories flooded back. Olivia insisting he'd agreed to plans he didn't remember making. Important documents going missing, only to turn up in places he swore he'd already checked. The constant feeling that he was losing his grip. "Oh, God," Ethan whispered, putting his head in his hands. Veronica gave him a moment to process before speaking again. "Mr. Hawthorne, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, you need to focus on protecting yourself, both legally and financially." Ethan looked up, a newfound determination in his eyes. "You're right. What do I need to do?" "First, we need to secure any remaining assets," Veronica said. "Then, we start building a case. Every bit of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, it all matters." As Veronica outlined their next steps, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the life he thought he had. Rage at Olivia's betrayal. But beneath it all, a spark of something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He would expose the truth. He would reclaim his life. And he would make damn sure Olivia and Adrian paid for what they'd done. As Ethan left Veronica's office, his mind raced with everything he'd learned. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to focus. He had work to do. First stop, the bank. He needed to freeze any accounts Olivia hadn't already drained and set up new ones in his name only. As he drove, he rehearsed what he'd say. A half-truth about identity theft concerns should do the trick without raising too many red flags. Next, he'd need to gather every important document he could find. Birth certificate, social security card, car titles. Anything Olivia might try to use against him. He made a mental note to rent a safety deposit box to store it all. As he pulled into the bank parking lot, his phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. XO." Ethan's jaw clenched. How many times had he received messages like this? Never suspecting the truth. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a neutral expression before responding. "No problem. Have a good night. Keep it simple. Act normal. Don't give anything away." As he walked into the bank, Ethan's mind drifted to the mountain of questions still unanswered. How deep did this embezzlement scheme go? Were there other victims besides the hospital and himself? And most pressingly, what exactly were Olivia and Adrian planning to do to him? The chilling phrase from that handwritten note echoed in his mind. Deal with E permanently. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He needed answers and fast. But for now, he had to focus on the task at hand, one step at a time. As he approached the teller's window, Ethan straightened his shoulders and plastered on his best concerned citizen face. Time to start taking back control of his life. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Ethan Hawthorne stood in the garage, his hand shaking slightly as he examined the small GPS tracker. It was barely larger than a quarter, innocuous enough to go unnoticed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. The past week had been a blur of covert actions and sleepless nights. After his meeting with Veronica Sloan, Ethan had thrown himself into gathering evidence. He'd ordered hidden cameras and GPS trackers, watching tutorial videos late into the night to ensure he installed them correctly. Now, as the first rays of dawn crept through the garage windows, Ethan prepared to take his surveillance to the next level. He slipped out to Olivia's car, carefully attaching the tracker beneath the rear bumper. His heart raced, half expecting Olivia to burst out of the house at any moment. But the morning remained quiet. Ethan retreated inside, heading straight for his laptop. He pulled up a fake Facebook profile he'd created under the name Alex Thompson. It was bare bones for now, just enough to pass a cursory inspection. He typed Adrian Blackwood into the search bar, his jaw clenching as the doctor's smug face appeared on the screen. Ethan spent the next hour combing through Adrian's public posts, making notes of any potentially useful information. Favorite restaurants, hobbies, mutual friends with Olivia. Anything that might help him understand their relationship better. As he worked, a notification pinged on his phone. The GPS tracker was active. A map showed Olivia's car heading towards the hospital. Ethan's stomach churned. Was she really going to work or meeting Adrian somewhere? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't let paranoia cloud his judgment. He needed hard evidence, not just suspicions. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a routine. He'd wake up early, check the GPS logs, and review any overnight footage from the hidden cameras. Then he'd head to work, struggling to maintain a facade of normalcy while his mind raced with new information and theories. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Ethan's careful observation finally paid off. He was grading papers in the living room, half listening to Olivia's phone conversation in the kitchen. She thought he was engrossed in his work, but every sense was attuned to her words. "Yes, everything's set," Olivia said in a low voice. "We'll transfer the last batch of funds next week. Then we can move forward with the plan for Ethan." Ethan's blood ran cold. He forced himself to keep writing, pen moving mechanically across the page. "Don't worry," Olivia continued. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Once we frame him for the embezzlement, it'll be easy to handle the rest." The implications of her words hit Ethan like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal from him. They wanted him out of the picture entirely. As soon as Olivia ended the call, Ethan excused himself to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to quell the panic rising in his chest. This was no longer just about infidelity or financial crimes. His life was in danger. He needed help, legal help. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Samantha Torres speaking. "Sam, it's Ethan. Ethan Hawthorne. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ethan? My God, it's been ages. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "But I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Can we meet?" Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency of the situation. "Of course," Samantha replied without hesitation. "My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Do you need the address?" Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "No, I'll find it. Thank you, Sam. Really." As he ended the call, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Samantha had always been the sharpest legal mind in their college circle. If anyone could help him navigate this nightmare, it was her. The next day, Ethan sat across from Samantha in her sleek downtown office, pouring out the whole sordid tale. To her credit, Samantha listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When Ethan finished, Samantha leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Ethan, I won't sugarcoat this. You're in a very precarious position, but the fact that you've gathered so much evidence already is going to work in your favor." "So, what do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from talking. Samantha's eyes glinted with determination. "We build an ironclad case. Every scrap of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, every financial transaction, it all goes into a dossier. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice." For the next several hours, they pored over the evidence Ethan had collected, organizing it into a coherent narrative. Samantha's legal expertise helped identify key points that would be crucial in both criminal and civil proceedings. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, Samantha fixed Ethan with a serious look. "There's one more thing we need to discuss, Ethan. Your safety." Ethan nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. If they're willing to frame me for embezzlement, who knows what else they might try." "Exactly," Samantha said. "I want you to start keeping a detailed log of your movements. Anytime you leave the house, text me your destination. And if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me immediately." "Got it," Ethan replied, feeling both reassured and terrified by the precautions. As he left Samantha's office, dossier tucked securely in his briefcase, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly, anger at Olivia's betrayal, but also a growing sense of resolve. He would not be a victim. He would fight back, armed with the truth and the law. Little did he know, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was about to get much, much worse. The following weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization for Ethan. By day, he taught his history classes, discussed homework assignments, and attended faculty meetings. But his mind was never far from the web of deceit he was untangling at home. The strain began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. His normally pristine lesson plans became disorganized, and more than once he found himself staring blankly at his students, lost in thought about his next move against Olivia and Adrian. It was Daryl Washington who finally confronted him about it. The two had been friends since Ethan started at the school, sharing a love for obscure historical trivia and terrible dad jokes. "All right, spill it," Daryl said one afternoon, cornering Ethan in the empty teacher's lounge. "What's going on with you, man? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." Ethan opened his mouth to deflect, but the concern in Daryl's eyes broke through his defenses. Before he knew it, the whole story came pouring out. The affair, the embezzlement, the threats to his life. By the time he finished, Daryl looked as shell-shocked as Ethan felt. "Jesus Christ," Daryl breathed. "I had no idea. Ethan, why didn't you say something sooner?" Ethan shrugged helplessly. "I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. It's bad enough that I'm living it." Daryl shook his head firmly. "That's not how friendship works, buddy. You don't have to go through this alone." He paused, considering. "Look, I can't fix this for you, but I can help cover for you here at school. If you need to duck out for a meeting with your lawyer or whatever, just say the word. I've got your back." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thanks, Daryl. That means a lot." With Daryl's support at work, Ethan was able to focus more energy on building his case. He spent hours each night combing through financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions. The scope of Olivia and Adrian's embezzlement scheme was staggering. It wasn't just the hospital's charitable foundation they'd been stealing from. The fraud extended to several affiliated clinics and even patient accounts. One night, as Olivia slept soundly upstairs, Ethan made a breakthrough. He'd managed to access her laptop while she was in the shower, quickly copying files onto a hidden flash drive. Now, poring over the documents, he uncovered the full extent of their plan. They'd been siphoning money from multiple sources, laundering it through a series of shell companies before funneling it into offshore accounts. The amounts were astronomical. Millions of dollars that should have gone to patient care and medical research, now lining the pockets of two greedy conspirators. Ethan's hands shook as he compiled his findings. This wasn't just about him anymore. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of victims. Patients who'd been overcharged, employees whose pensions had been raided, charities deprived of crucial funding. He knew he had to do something, but going to the police now might tip off Olivia and Adrian before he had all the evidence he needed to ensure their conviction. No! He needed a subtler approach. After agonizing over the decision, Ethan composed an anonymous email to the hospital's compliance officer. He outlined his suspicions about financial irregularities in the charitable foundation, providing just enough detail to spark an internal investigation without revealing the full scope of what he knew. As he hit send, Ethan felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The wheels were in motion now. There was no going back. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Olivia's phone ringing. He feigned sleep as she answered, his ears straining to catch her side of the conversation. "What do you mean an audit?" Olivia hissed, her voice tight with barely contained panic. "Who authorized that?" Ethan's heart raced. His anonymous tip had worked faster than he'd anticipated. No, don't do anything yet," Olivia continued. "We need to be careful. I'll talk to Adrian and we'll figure out our next move." As soon as Olivia left for work, Ethan sprang into action. He knew time was running out. If Olivia and Adrian realized how much he knew, they might accelerate their plans against him. He spent the morning making copies of all his evidence, storing backups in secure locations. Then, steeling himself, he made a series of anonymous calls to some of the victims he'd identified in his investigation. He couldn't reveal everything, but he urged them to come forward to the authorities with any suspicions about financial mismanagement at the hospital. By the time evening rolled around, Ethan was exhausted but satisfied. The net was closing in on Olivia and Adrian, but he knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. As if on cue, Olivia breezed into the house, a forced cheeriness in her voice. "Honey, I'm home, and I've got a surprise for you." Ethan's guard immediately went up. "Oh, what's that?" Olivia's smile was brittle as she handed him a brochure. "I've booked us a little getaway for our anniversary next month. A lovely cabin in the mountains. Just the two of us, no distractions. What do you think?" Ethan's blood ran cold as he examined the brochure. This had to be it, the accident they'd been planning for him. His mind raced, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't give away his knowledge. "Wow, that's unexpected," he managed, forcing a smile. "It looks great, honey. Thanks for setting this up." Olivia beamed, but Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes. "I'm so glad you like it. I thought we could use some time to reconnect, you know?" As Olivia chattered on about the amenities at the cabin, Ethan's mind whirled. He needed to find out more details about this trip without arousing suspicion, and he needed a failsafe in case things went wrong. Later that night, as Olivia slept, Ethan composed a timed email to Samantha. In it, he detailed everything he knew about Olivia and Adrian's crimes, including his suspicions about their plans for him on the upcoming trip. He set it to send automatically if he didn't check in within 24 hours of their scheduled return date. It felt morbid, writing what amounted to a dead man's switch. But Ethan knew he had to be prepared for every eventuality. He wouldn't let Olivia and Adrian get away with their crimes, even if the worst should happen to him. As he closed his laptop, a steely resolve settled over Ethan. He'd been reactive for too long, always one step behind Olivia and Adrian's machinations. It was time to take control of the situation. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start subtly manipulating Olivia into revealing more about their upcoming getaway. He'd use every scrap of information to bolster his counterplan, and when the time came, he'd be ready. The night before their anniversary trip, Ethan sat in the darkened living room, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the coffee table before him. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling wood. Upstairs, Olivia slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Ethan's fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the arm of his chair as he waited. He'd made sure Olivia's wine at dinner was a little stronger than usual, ensuring she'd turn in early. Now, with the clock ticking closer to midnight, he steeled himself for what was to come. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Samantha. "Everything's in place." "You're sure about this?" Ethan's jaw clenched as he typed his response. "No choice. It has to be tonight." He pocketed the phone and stood, moving silently through the house he'd once considered a sanctuary. Now it felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and shattered trust. In the master bedroom, Olivia stirred as Ethan flicked on the lights. She blinked groggily, confusion giving way to alarm as she registered the hard set of his features. "Ethan? What's going on?" she mumbled, sitting up. "We need to talk, Olivia," Ethan said, his voice cold and steady. "About your affair with Adrian, about the money you've been stealing, about your plans to kill me." Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of panic quickly masked by indignation. "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" Ethan almost laughed at the irony. How many times had she used that exact phrase to make him doubt himself? But not this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of photos, tossing them onto the bed. "Recognize these?" he asked as Olivia's face drained of color. Or how about this? He played a recording on his phone, Olivia's own voice discussing embezzled funds with Adrian. That's not what it sounds like, Olivia stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. Save it, Ethan snapped. I know everything, Olivia. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every plan you and Adrian cooked up, including your little scheme for our anniversary trip. Olivia's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she launched into a frantic denial. Ethan, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Adrian and I, we were just what? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. Just stealing millions from sick people? Just planning to frame me for your crimes? Just plotting to murder me? The weight of evidence was overwhelming. As Ethan laid out detail after damning detail, Olivia's denials grew weaker. Finally, faced with irrefutable proof of her misdeeds, she crumbled. I'm sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. Adrian, he said it would be easy, that no one would get hurt. Ethan felt a twinge of pity, quickly swallowed by a wave of disgust. No one would get hurt? What about the patients whose care suffered because of your greed? What about our marriage? What about me, Olivia? You were going to kill me. Olivia's head snapped up, a calculating gleam replacing the tears in her eyes. Kill you? Don't be ridiculous. I love you, Ethan. This is all just a big misunderstanding. We can work through this, can't we? For better or worse, remember? Ethan watched as Olivia cycled through tactics. Pleading for forgiveness gave way to threats of ruining his reputation. When that failed to sway him, she tried to shift blame, painting herself as Adrian's unwitting victim. But Ethan stood firm, unmoved by her manipulations. It's over, Olivia. I've already given copies of everything to the police and the hospital board. They're expecting my statement first thing in the morning. Olivia's face contorted with rage. You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll destroy you for this. I swear to God. No, you won't, Ethan said calmly, holding up his phone. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. One more piece of evidence to add to the pile. All fight drained from Olivia then. She slumped back against the headboard, defeated. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. Now I'm leaving, Ethan replied. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be testifying against you and Adrian in court. What happens to you after that is up to the justice system. He turned to go, pausing at the doorway to look back at the woman he'd once loved more than life itself. She seemed small and pathetic now, a far cry from the confident, caring partner he'd thought he married. Goodbye, Olivia, he said softly. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with the ruins of her carefully constructed web of lies. As Ethan's car pulled away from the house, he felt a curious mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. Anger still simmered beneath the surface. But mostly he felt lighter, as if he'd set down a burden he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. He checked his phone, seeing a flurry of messages from Samantha. It's done, he texted back. Meeting the board at 9 a.m. See you there. The next morning dawned bright and clear, at odds with the storm of emotions roiling inside Ethan. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors to the hospital's main conference room. Inside, a grim-faced group awaited him. The hospital board sat at one end of the long table, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. At the other end, a pair of stone-faced detectives conferred in low voices. Samantha rose to greet him, squeezing his arm in silent support. Ready? She murmured. Ethan nodded, setting his briefcase on the table. As I'll ever be. For the next 3 hours, Ethan laid out his case. He presented financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, a mountain of evidence that left no doubt about Olivia and Adrian's guilt. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to horror as the full scope of the embezzlement scheme became clear. Millions of dollars, siphoned away from patient care research funding, and employee pensions. My God, breathed Dr. Eleanor Patel, the board's chairwoman. How did we miss this? They were clever, Ethan explained. Used a network of shell companies, falsified records. But once you know what to look for, he spread his hands, indicating the damning evidence before them. As the meeting wound down, Dr. Patel stood, her face etched with determination. Mr. Hawthorne, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, we will be taking immediate action. Dr. Blackwood and Mrs. Hawthorne are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. The detectives approached next, peppering Ethan with questions about his evidence and methods. He answered as best he could, acutely aware of the fine line he'd walked in gathering some of his proof. Finally, as the room began to clear, Samantha pulled Ethan aside. You did good in there, she said softly. But this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next? Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on him. I have to be, he replied. For all the people they hurt. For myself. Samantha nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes. Well, you won't be doing it alone. I've been thinking we should set up some kind of support system for the other victims. Legal aid, counseling, that sort of thing. What do you say? A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. I say let's get to work. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Samantha threw themselves into organizing support for the victims of Olivia and Adrian's fraud. They set up a hotline, arranged pro bono legal consultations, and coordinated with therapists willing to offer discounted services. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As news of the scandal broke, Ethan found himself besieged by reporters hungry for details. Worse were the calls and messages from Olivia's family and friends, alternating between pleas for him to drop the charges and vicious attacks on his character. You never deserved her anyway, Olivia's sister snarled in one particularly nasty voicemail. She was too good for you. You'll regret this, you backstabbing piece of shit. Ethan deleted the message with a weary sigh. He'd expected backlash, but the relentless nature of it was wearing him down. You okay? Samantha asked, noticing his furrowed brow as they pored over case files one evening. Ethan managed a wan smile. Just tired. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, you know? Samantha's eyes flashed with determination. It is. Think of all the people you're helping, the lives you're putting back together. That's worth everything. Her words bolstered Ethan's resolve. He threw himself back into their work with renewed vigor, focusing on the good they were doing rather than the negativity swirling around him. Slowly but surely, progress was made. The support group grew, with victims finding solace and strength in shared experiences. The legal team, spearheaded by Samantha, began building a rock-solid case against Olivia and Adrian. And through it all, Ethan found himself growing. The betrayal and pain were still there, a dull ache in his chest. But alongside it bloomed something new, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger channeled into positive action. He began to rediscover parts of himself he'd thought long lost. The passionate teacher, temporarily buried under the weight of suspicion and fear, reemerged. His students noticed a change, responding with increased engagement and enthusiasm. One afternoon, as Ethan wrapped up a particularly lively discussion on the civil rights movement, he caught Daryl grinning at him from the doorway. What? Ethan asked as the last student filed out. Daryl shook his head, still smiling. Nothing, man. It's just good to see the old Ethan back, you know? Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. Yeah, he replied softly. It's good to be back. As the months wore on and the case against Olivia and Adrian built, Ethan found himself settling into a new normal. The pain of betrayal gradually dulled, replaced by a steely determination to see justice done. Finally, 6 months after that fateful night of confrontation, the trial began. Ethan sat ramrod straight in the witness box, his voice steady as he recounted the sordid details of Olivia and Adrian's crimes. He could feel their eyes boring into him from the defense table, but he refused to look their way. Instead, he focused on the jury, on the victims filling the gallery behind them. With each piece of evidence presented, each damning fact laid bare, Ethan saw a weight lift from their shoulders. This was why he'd fought so hard. This was what made it all worthwhile. As he stepped down from the stand, Ethan caught Samantha's eye. She gave him a small nod, a gesture packed with pride and solidarity. In that moment, Ethan realized something had shifted between them. The long hours working side by side, the shared mission of justice. It had forged a connection deeper than mere friendship. The trial stretched on for weeks, a painstaking unraveling of Olivia and Adrian's web of deceit. But in the end, justice prevailed. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, and the judge's sentence was appropriately severe. As Olivia was led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Ethan one last time. Ethan felt a chapter of his life closing, but rather than sadness, he felt only relief and a burgeoning sense of possibility. In the weeks that followed, life took on a brighter hue. The school board, impressed by Ethan's integrity and perseverance throughout the ordeal, offered him the long-coveted position of department head. He accepted with a mixture of pride and humility, vowing to use the role to inspire his students as he'd been inspired by the pursuit of justice. But Ethan's ambitions didn't stop there. Using a portion of the recovered funds awarded to him in the civil suit, he established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic deception. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding, a way to transform his pain into something positive. And through it all, Samantha remained by his side. What had begun as a professional relationship slowly blossomed into something more. They took things slow, both wary of rushing into anything after the turmoil of the past year. But there was no denying the spark between them, the deep understanding forged in the crucible of shared struggle. One evening, as they walked hand in hand to the park near Ethan's new apartment, Samantha turned to him with a soft smile. "You know, when you called me that day, I never imagined we'd end up here," she said. Ethan chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Believe me, neither did I, but I'm glad we did." They paused, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "What are you thinking?" Samantha asked, noticing the pensive look on Ethan's face. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm thinking about how far I've come," he said finally. "A year ago, I was lost, drowning in lies and betrayal. Now," he gestured expansively, encompassing the park, the foundation, Samantha herself. "Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Samantha leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan Hawthorne. You took something terrible and turned it into a force for good. I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you do next." Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling a surge of warmth and hope. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he was eager to see where it might lead. As they turned to head home, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The pain, the struggle, the moments of despair, they had all shaped him, forged him into someone stronger and wiser than he'd been before. He'd lost much, it was true, but he'd gained so much more. Purpose, self-respect, and a chance at true happiness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew he was ready to face them not alone, but with allies by his side and a newfound strength in his heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Ethan Hawthorne stepped forward into his future, ready to write the next chapter of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.